Hey, everybody, this is Doug Phelps of the Kentucky Headhunters. I want you to know you're listening to the Nothing Shocking podcast with my buddy Eric and Jeff. Keep them in there now.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studios is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter at No Shock Pod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We would like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is
Doug Phelps of the Kentucky Headhunters.
Yeah, promoting their summer touring. They're doing the Weekend Warrior thing, going out on playing Thursday, Friday, Saturdays. Check for them in your area. They might be coming to your town soon this summer.
Their last studio album was from 2021. That's a fact, Jack. Check it out.
Yeah, great interview. Let's get to it.
All right, good night.
Good night. Doug, welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'd like to introduce you to my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Doug, thanks for joining us tonight.
Man, thanks for having me, guys. My pleasure.
Well, we're so excited. Thanks for all the correspondence, and thanks for bumping your spot up here quite a bit. So we're excited to have you tonight.
Hey, it's great for me as well. It's about to get really crazy on the road, so this works great.
Well, the Kentucky Headhunters just played 2 sold-out shows in Sioux City, Iowa, and Pittsburgh, Kansas. Can you talk a little bit more about the shows and what was it like to play out there with no COVID restrictions once again?
Well, I think the fact that we had a good live rowdy, full house kind of says a lot, if people are ready to get back out again. And we started seeing this some last year as well. We had a busy touring season last year. And that was really the beginnings, I think, of people going, okay, we're tired of being cooped up and all this other stuff. So people started coming out. We had some great shows last year, but a great start to the season. We had a busy year, had a nice long break, rest and recoup and take care of the grand youngins and all that kind of stuff. But just a great sign that, people are ready to get out and get with it and have a good time.
Absolutely. With the Headhunters being the heritage act that they are, what type of venues do you guys play in now? Do you guys go for a certain size, or do you just play anywhere?
Well, we play anywhere. That's the kind of the cool thing of where we are at this point in our career. We can play the biggest of the big or the smallest of the small. We have a 4-man crew with our 4-man band, and hook up our trailer to our bus, and we got our merch and we got our gear, and we're good to go. So we've played everything from the big festivals, city festivals, fair dates, bike rallies, private. We'll do the private gig here and there. It's just a lot of casinos. That's really there's been a lot of great rooms You used to think of casinos as loungy and all those things kind of back in the day, but man, there's some great rooms out there now, and they're bringing in all kinds. We played the Hard Rock a casino in Sioux City, and they've had everybody and their brother in there, from rock and country and everything. So the casinos have really started to come online as well as a lot of the stuff that we play.
Absolutely. Well, as far as, once again, quote unquote, the heritage act that you guys are, touring, what is the band's preference? Is it those fly-out dates, or do you prefer the getting in the bus and do it the traditional way? Or where are you guys at in your careers right now as far as touring schedule goes?
Well, we are mainly get on the bus and roll band. We have flown some, but we were always a get on the bus and tour band up until about, I want to say 2016, because Richard Young, our illustrious rhythm guitar player and co-vocalist in the band, would not fly. He had the legitimate fear of flying and would not fly. And as a side note, what kind of finally inspired him to be able to get on a plane, his son, John Fred Young, is the drummer for Blackstone Cherry.
Yeah.
And
yes.
I'm y'all are probably familiar with Blackstone Cherry. Those guys broke huge overseas.
Yes.
They've done okay here in the States as well, but they just blew up overseas. And there's Richard going, here's my son's band playing Download and all these massive venues. And I'm too afraid to get on a plane to go see them. So they kept after us because a lot of interviews they're doing, they're going, hey, well, your dad's band, Headhunters, when are they going to come over? And we had opportunities. To in fact, we had a great opportunity in 91. And I may be getting a little deep into weeds here, but this is what we're doing. We're just talking, right?
Right.
Exactly.
And after picking on Nashville, it came out in '89 and it hit, and we started selling a bunch of records. We were contacted by Mark Knopfler, and he wanted us to open stadium dates overseas. And it had been a 3 or 4 weekend deal. And I mean, stadium dates. You're talking about a lot of people getting in front of a lot of people. And, Richard wouldn't fly. So we were trying to work it out, and we finally got it figured out. He was going to take a boat over. We cleared the schedule so we could do it. We had everything negotiated, and the Gulf War broke out. so it canceled that and got postponed it. By the time it came back around again, we already had a ton of dates here in the States that we just couldn't get out of. So we missed that opportunity. But years later, the fact that Blackstone Cherry was doing so well over there and wanted us to come over, he finally just bit the bullet and said, I got to do this. I got to do it for them. I got to do it for myself. I got to do it for the band. And so he will now. And the crazy thing, his brother-in-law was a doctor. He passed away a few years ago, but, gave him a little happy pill. And, he took that, had a beer or two on the flight. And he was up looking out the window and walking around talking to people like he'd been flying all his life. So, long story to get around to the fact that we do fly some now if we have to, if it's, if that's the only way to manage it. Like we do a lot of the like rock. We're doing Rock Legends cruise for the 3rd time coming up next year in February, and we generally, we'll generally fly. That'll be a fly date for us. So we will fly a little bit, but mainly we get on the bus and we roll. That's what we're most comfortable with.
Fantastic.
Nice. How do you guys pick your set list for your songs? Now you guys got quite a few albums and you got some newer stuff. Are you mixing in some of the newer stuff, or how do you pick your set list?
Well, it's difficult. It's, we're 15, 16 albums into it now. And of course the first 2 albums are the ones that had the radio hits and, sold a few million records and all that stuff. So there's certain songs that we got to play. We got to play them every night. And it's really hard then to kind of pick and choose. We kind of honed in on a 90-minute set, a 75-minute set, a 60-minute set. And, it can change a little bit here and there, but we kind of settled in on it. We do need to add a couple of the new songs off of it's the latest album. It's not brand new, but it's the latest album. We're only doing one off of it now. So we're talking about maybe adding a couple of those in, but then you got to kick something else out. So that's the longevity and the amount of albums makes it kind of difficult to even squeeze it in a 90-minute set,
Very much so. Have you guys ever been requested to play an album from front to back? For instance, picking on Nashville. But have you guys ever been requested to play a certain album in its entirety?
Well, not specifically, but there's been certain areas of the country where that album it was like, every song was like a single, and actually the label should have. That's before they did that kind of thing. That that whole album was album full of singles, and there's been a area or two here we play and we hear all the old the album cuts and stuff they want to hear. So in essence, they would like to just hear the whole thing from start to finish, and we'll throw a skip rope in there or. High Steppin' Daddy, a couple of those kind of album tracks off of the first record that did get some airplay, but they weren't necessarily officially singles. So I think that'd be kind of a unique thing to do at some point. I would find that very interesting, see how it went over.
Absolutely. Kind of let's talk about the origins of the band. Can you take us back to the beginnings of how it all began for you and your bandmates?
Well, funny how all the roads converge, sometimes to make a band happen.
Yeah.
My particular path was, I'm not from Kentucky. Originally, I'm from Southeast Missouri, Northeast Arkansas area. That's where I grew up, and played music all my life. My family, everybody plays music in my family. It's like in the it's in the genes. It's in the DNA. And I hooked up with a keyboard player friend of mine from back home who he was different high school. He was in Arkansas, I was in Missouri, but it was about 10 miles apart, And we started playing a little gigs here and, functions here and there. And he was a really good writer already. And so we was in college together. He ended up auditioning for summer of 81 for the Opryland when it was still they still had music at Opryland, and it was all the rides and everything. So he got the gig. He was playing in the 50 show at Opryland in summer of 81. I was still in college in Northeast Arkansas at Arkansas State University at the time, and I got a call about October of that year. It was Craig Morris, my buddy. He said, "Hey, this is what I'm doing now," kind of updating you. But he says, from this gig here, I've landed a gig with Ronnie McDowell, who was a country music artist who was huge at the time. He was having #1 records on country radio. And he said, "Hey, he's looking for a new bass player and somebody who can sing." And he said, I suggested you, and are you interested? I said, "Yeah." So 20-year-old kid, in my third year of college, yeah. And I was still playing music, so I had a little Southern rock band back home. We was playing on weekends. And so I drove over and went to Portland, Tennessee, where Ronnie lived at the time, and I auditioned October of 81. And I ended up getting the gig. So that was my entry into the music scene here. It just so happened, Greg Martin, our lead guitar player, who is cousins to Richard and Fred Young in our band, Headhunter band, they had played music together off and on from 1968 until 1980, and had actually come close to getting a record deal. First with Swan Song Records. Which Bonham died and that fell through, and secondly with Capricorn Records. And when the plane went down, and that ended that. So they kind of struck out on two of their deals, and they split up. They finally split up in 80. Everybody was doing different stuff. Greg knew the horn player that was with Ronnie, who was leaving, and Ronnie wanted a second guitar player. He auditioned the same day I did. So here's two roads converged. And so through him, I met Richard and Fred, and and they were still playing and doing stuff here and there. Richard ended up writing down here as a writer at Acuff Rose Publishing Company in Nashville. And around December of '85, they had a Christmas gathering, and they said, let's jam, let's get together and jam. So they did, and it kind of spurred them on. Well, we need to get back, just put something together again, and just to play, just to have some fun. Their other cousin, Anthony Kenny, who had played with them, from the beginning until '80, had just gotten married and had a baby on the way, and he didn't want to do it. So Greg said, well, y'all know Doug. I'll bring Doug up, and we'll just have a good time. So March of '86, we're still, Greg and I are still with Ronnie, but March of '86, I go up to Kentucky, and we gather in Greg's basement, and we formed the Headhunters. That's basically, we said, hey, this is great, and we, all our influences kind of came together, and that's how the band. That's really the origin of how all the roads, all the paths kind of converged to make us, to turn us into the Headhunters. Let's put it that way.
Fantastic. All right, Doug. So this is a big, long question. So be patient with me, okay?
Okay, no problem.
So there are bands that are Southern rock bands with country influences. There are country bands that have rock influences. And there are rock bands with blues influences and vice versa. We can go all the way down the list as I say this. But the Kentucky Headhunters have been able to be one of those bands that have all the styles and influences that I've just spoke about, and then some. How does the band tiptoe around all of the genres? And you really can't really lock you into one. What I guess the psyche behind the Headhunters? How have you done it all these years?
Well, you know what? That's what you just said is what makes the musical stew that is the Headhunters. It is all of the different influences that we all have, and that filters through us. And when we write something or create music, whatever, it filters, all of that stuff filters through. And I think one of the best examples of that musical stew is Walk Softly. Walk Softly is a bluegrass song, which we sang bluegrass. We did a bluegrass harmony, but it's heavy. and Fred, if anybody who peels it back enough to listen to what Fred was playing on the drums, he was playing a disco beat. It's a disco. It's literally like a disco beat. So and it's aggressive, and and listen, anybody that knows anything about bluegrass knows that there's a ton of soul in bluegrass, and kind of bluesy. That's what it is, bluegrass. So that really kind of encapsulated the rock and the bluegrass and the country and all of it in just in one song. But we have heavily blues influence. I don't know if the question about our name was going to come up at some point, but that it kind of fits right now. When we put the band together, Greg was reading a book, and we were heavily influenced by the blues. That was definitely a part of one of our influences. He was reading a book called Deep Blues by Robert Palmer, not the singer, but the author. Mm-hmm. And the section about Muddy Waters was that he left, actually the area I'm from, Northeast Arkansas. He was kind of the Helen, Arkansas area, and had a great band, and they went to Chicago to make their name in the blues market. And they were so good, a lot of times they would ask if they could set in, or maybe it was open mic night, they'd get up there and perform, and they'd end up, getting the gig, maybe kicking another band out. They'd get the gig. And they called it head chopping. We're going to go chop some heads, And so because that's what they called it, they got the nickname Headhunters. And I don't know if it was, they never officially registered or anything, but they got the nickname Headhunters. And Greg was telling us that story, and I said, "Oh yeah, that's great. We want to be the Headhunters, because our music is going to be, it's going to be a little bit of this, that, and the other, but it's going to be aggressive, and so just the fact that blues kind of was that really that first foundation of what we did as far as putting our band together. We didn't want to start from what we did is we didn't want to start from our main influences, and of course for us our age, is Beatles and the Stones and Zeppelin and all those bands, which Zeppelin went back to the blues, Clapton went back to the blues, so we wanted, it's like what made them who they were, who were they listening to, how far back did they go? And so that's what we did. We just started. We didn't even write a lick of original music until we learned how to play those Muddy Waters, Sonny Boy Williamson, Jimmy Reed, all those songs. We'd pick out a song or two here and there, and we would learn it exactly as they played it. Mistakes, off rhythm, whatever it was that they did, is how we learned it. We wanted to do that first, and so that really kind of cemented our foundation, musical foundation. And from there, then we could add the rest of the influences, and then we started writing like crazy.
It's so funny because alternative country, I think you guys were the first one I ever heard somebody say the Kentucky Headhunters are country alternative or alternative country, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And when my senior year was 89, 90, I was working at Hardee's. And my boss comes in. He's like, "Have you heard the Kentucky Headhunters yet?" I'm like, "No, I haven't." And he's like, "It's George Jones meets Led Zeppelin. You got to check them out."
Yeah.
And he put them on. He had the cassette of Picking on National. He put it on. I was like, "I get it. I totally understand where he's coming from."
Yes.
Country alternative. You guys have had that label slapped on your backs before. Do you like the label, or is it just kind of just whatever?
They had such a hard time. Pinpointing everybody, you always want to be able to know what to call it. It's this, it's that, the other. And, interview after interview after Pick and Hit, when it hit and it went gold, and faster than ever. I think at the time it went gold faster than any debut act had ever got banned, at least band had gone gold. And it did the same with Platinum. So it's just, it just was selling like crazy. And, the interviews were coming fast and hard, and it's like, well, what do you call this? What do you call this? And we said, well, we just call it, we're a band, we're a band, and we have all these influences that come together, and and early on, we got to the point where we're saying, we're not really looking at fencing anything in, we just kind of like, riding the fences down and letting the music, letting the influences, meld together. And it's what makes it unique. And I'll be dong if, if Garth Brooks didn't come out with a second album called No Fences. And I've always wondered, I said, was he paying attention to what was going on? Did he get some of that from us? And I don't know, maybe. But anyway, that's always been the hardest thing for, like the interviewer to try to figure out what we are. And of course we don't help very much because we're not a country band, we're not a rock band, we're just a band, and we have all these influences that makes us who we are. So
well
said.
Awesome. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about your transition from, like, I'm not going to go into the weeds of, you left the band in 91, did your thing with your brother, but you came back in 97-ish, and you came back as like the lead singer, or the you went from not singing to taking over vocals. Can you just talk about that personal transition for you and what went behind you making the decision to take up the vocals?
Well, I've always sung all of the background, all the harmony vocals is me. That's always been me on the early stuff, and so I sung a lot. And on the live show, I'd always sing one or two lead.
Nice.
And Richard too. But when I came back, and actually I officially rejoined in the summer of '95.
Okay.
'96 is when we started writing and getting the new album together at the time. And at first, when I rejoined, we kind of thought, well, we'll find, we'll keep the formula. We'll find somebody who sounds like my brother, and just keep going that way. And actually, it was my brother who said, "Hey, no one sounds more like me than you do. Said, step up.
Yeah.
Come on, let's do it." And we all kind of looked at each other and said, "Well, okay, yeah, that's right." And so, and I do. I can sound a lot like my brother, obviously. So that's how we decided to go with it. And Richard has stepped up and has started singing quite a bit more as well. I do certainly all the old stuff, and then maybe I don't know, 3/4 of the new stuff as well. But Richard is singing more, and Richard's really strong. He's the the blues thing for Richard is he's probably at his best when he's singing kind of more of our blues type albums. And we did 2 albums with Johnny Johnson. Chuck Berry's original piano player. So there you go. We're kind of shooting off into this direction or that direction, just kind of whatever mood we're in, I guess.
I kind of wanted to bring this back to Picking on Nashville. Once again,
okay.
Released in 1989. It seemed like 1989 to 90. You saw music in general, rock, country. Music was evolving.
Yeah.
We could go down the list of albums from '89 that were like, "Whoa, this is the sound of music is changing," and Picking on Nashville was considered once again groundbreaking for what it was. While you guys were in the studio creating that album, did you have any idea that you guys were onto something different that your audience would say, and even the critics would say, this is totally different than what we're used to? Can you kind of take us back to that?
Yes, and we knew we had something because we were playing live shows before we had Picking on Nashville written and Electric Barnyard written before we even recorded the first record. We'd already had all those songs written. We could have recorded Electric Barnyard first. We just was writing like crazy and playing live shows here and there and yonder. We did the Chitlin show, the radio show in Mumfordsville, Kentucky, WLOC, little 3,000 watt FM, mono FM, whatever station, and we'd set up live in the studio and kind of akin to the King Biscuit Flour Hour, and we'd have guests come in and play. So we were playing these songs and seeing the reaction from people who, started following us and bringing more people to us and selling out, these little clubs around Kentucky and wherever. And we'd sneak into Nashville and play occasionally. So we were already seeing the reaction to these songs that people, they weren't on the radio. We weren't, it didn't even have a deal yet. So we knew we had something. We didn't necessarily know what we had, but we knew we were getting a reaction and, kind of causing a stir. And so we thought, when we first started, when we recorded Picking on Nashville, we went in the studio. That's another story. If you want me to get into it right now, I will.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. A banker investment guy saw us with Ronnie, me and Greg with Ronnie, and I think Richard, who was still writing songs at Acuff Rose, had come out on the road with us for a bit to sell shirts and to write with Ronnie. And he got up and we did, I don't know, we'd open up with Hideaway, which is musical, and then Richard come up and Jonathan D.W. Lyle was in the audience listening in Richmond, Virginia, and approached us after and said, man, hey, this is kind of a hobby for me. I like, I love music and I like, giving a little money to bands that want to go in the studio and maybe record some of their stuff. He asked us about what, did we have something going on? We told him about our band. And so he gave us $4,500.
Oh, wow.
And we went into the sound shop in Nashville, which is where we had recorded with Ronnie quite a bit. So we were already very comfortable there. Engineer Mike Bradley, great guy. And so we told Mike what we had, and we went in the last part of 88. I think it was December, might have been October. It might have been October of 8. It was the latter part of 88. Went in the studio and cut 8 songs, and we called it Picking on Nashville. Fred came up with that because he always liked the Chet Atkins picking on the Beatles. And that's where that came from, obviously. So, we made 500 cassettes, and we were supposed to be in the black and white of Merle Travis's, guitar picker extraordinaire from Kentucky, finger picker, on the headstock, and it came back pink and white. So we called it the pink tape, and we started pitching around a little bit, and we didn't know anybody at labels, but I knew, because I'd registered a BMI songwriter, I knew Kurt Denny at BMI, and Richard obviously knew some folks. He's ASCAP. He knew some folks at ASCAP and in publishing side of things as well. And so we gave them, copies of it. Check it out. Hey, we thought, to get back to what we were thinking at the time, we thought maybe that it would be, an alternative label, a Rhino. It'd be, maybe one of those kind of record labels that might be interested in us. Alligator, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I forget who it was specifically that gave a copy to Larry Hamby, who was the vice president of CBS at the time.
Oh, wow.
And he flipped it. Of course, no picture on the cover. And we rarely played Nashville. And so he flipped out over the music and got in touch with us and said, I need y'all to do a showcase, and I want to bring folks down from New York, and I think we got something here. So he's the first one to they're normal, the CBS, Nashville CBS. And we went, well, okay. So we said, well, if we're gonna do a showcase, we'll invite everybody out. And so we did. And I think RCA and MCA and CBS and the one that we didn't invite because we didn't know who was there at the time, Harold Shedd at Mercury had just taken over. And through the publishing side of things and a mutual friend of ours, Tom Long, they got Harold to come out and see us. So he didn't have the advantage of the tape, of hearing us at all.
Mm-hmm.
The others were heard the tape and liked what they heard. But when a bunch of long-haired boys up there in Marshalls and SVTs got up there and like a rock set doing this stuff, we scared everybody half to death. We didn't hear nothing from nobody. But to his credit, Harold stayed and approached my brother after, and it's like, who are y'all and what is this and what's going on, And, well, you didn't get a tape? No, I didn't get a tape. Well, okay, here's, something we've done and, check it out. So he calls us the next day and says, boys, y'all did this yourself? Yeah, yes, sir. He said, well, I'm going to sign this band. And he said, we may all be cooking hamburgers next year, but I'm going to sign this band. And after scaring everybody half to death, we thought, yeah, right, but he did. He followed through, and July of '89 we signed the deal. So I know I got deep in the weeds here, and something took me off path, but I know we're talking about picking. He got it done. We got the deal done, and some hard negotiations, believe me, but we ended up with a decent deal. And so he said, well, I don't, go back in, give me 2 more, just do what you did. So we went back in and we recorded Milkman and Smooth, which is the last cut on side 1 and the last cut on side 2. And they're picking on Nashville. Now, and I know I was talking about the name, that's what it was. We were just still the Headhunters, and they did a deep search on the name because Shenandoah had just went through this getting sued for the name and cost them a bunch of money, and it was, so they wanted to make sure that, and they loved it. They loved it. Harold loved the name Headhunters, but when they did the search, even though it had never been registered, it had been used. The Muddy Waters band was nicknamed that, and then Herbie Hancock came along, and he named his band Headhunters 2, Roman numeral 2. Mm-hmm. And so Harold, he said, man, I know it's not officially been registered, but he says it has been used. And he said, it scares us. We don't want to, go through the same thing that Shenandoah just went through. So he said, can you add something to it? And we're like, well, we the first thing we thought of, well, the Mighty Headhunters, and which is kind of, not very good. But, he's the one who's came back and said, well, listen, y'all are based out of Kentucky. Well, the Kentucky Headhunters. And I was all for it. That's great. To Richard and them's credit, we're from Arkansas, Missouri. So they felt, well, that's not really fair to them. They're like, no. Hey, that's where we're based out of. That old farmhouse practice house on the farm. That's our base. We're the Kentucky Headhunters. And they're definitely, obviously there was, no other Kentucky Headhunters. And the name I mean, the name got as much attention as the music, and then of course our looks too. So yes, we were not mainstream at all, but our music, and it wasn't mainstream as far as what was going on, but it was commercial. It, people liked what they heard, obviously, and they went out and bought it, even though we were so different at the time. Walk Softly only went to 25 officially on the charts, and we begged and pleaded to get to there, but it got played a ton. It just, there were certain stations that wouldn't play it. And, but I'll tell you what, it sold us 500,000 records in under 6 months at the time. And so we knew, that we had something going on, we were connecting directly with the people. And then really the thing that helped us the most during that time was CMT was brand new. And our videos got a lot of airplay. So we had a bunch of number one videos at that time, and that really did help expose the band, and brought us to Hank putting us on tour with him all of 90 and a good chunk of 91. And so not only CMT, and then radio was coming back around to us a little more, and then being out there with him in front of 15, 20,000 people every night. So that was, it's just, it all converged, man. It just all converged. And we're just small town. We are country boys. Richard and them still on their farm. My hometown of Cardwell, Missouri, at the time I grew up, 860 people and cotton fields and soybeans. And, I worked on the farm all my life. So we are country folk. But we love the Beatles and the Stones and Zeppelin and, and the blues and of course, Bill Monroe and, the bluegrass side of things and all of it. We just grew up in a great era, a great time of music.
Oh, fantastic.
Yep. Well, I'm going to take it back to That's a Fact, Jack. That's the one from 2021. I think your most recent album. When you guys were recording,
yes.
Are you still recording the old-fashioned way, getting in the studio together, or are you sharing tracks over the airwaves like they're doing it nowadays? How's it work for you?
No, we're old school, man.
Nice.
We love getting in the studio and banging it out and getting the sounds right, and we're very comfortable in the studio up there in Glasgow, Kentucky.
Yeah.
David Barrett, our guy up there, he's recorded the last half a dozen. Well, probably the last. I bet he's recorded the last 10 albums for us. And it's just it's close to them. It's only about an hour and 20 minutes from me. I'm down in Hendersonville, Tennessee, but I'm only about an hour and 20 minutes away, and so it's very comfortable. Go up there and get started early afternoon, whatever. We'll go to about 8 or 9, 10 o'clock at night. And I love it. We just love it.
So cool. Kind of wanted to cover a couple of songs with you. I have Alexa in Amazon Music, and every time I ask her to play the Kentucky Headhunters, I always get to hear My Big Mexican Dinner. Can you talk about the origins of that song? And it is such an awesome song. Every time it never gets old. Can you talk a little bit about that track?
That's we take our silliness very serious.
Yeah.
we love cutting up and going. We had some serious songs too, but High Steppin' Daddy and Big Mexican Dinner. We have some. We love those type of songs as well, just some silliness. And we'll be in the practice house and somebody will come up with some silly phrase and then off we'll go, we'll just start writing it. And, even like, as a sidetrack, my daddy was a milkman. That's, when we started that song around the same time we was writing Dumas Walker and, all the other songs. And all we had was the Bo Diddley beat, and my daddy was a milkman. That's all we had. And so, boy, that's a story. So it took me a little while to get to that one, but I ended up writing the rest of that one. And it took me 4 or 5 months later, it just finally, all the lights came on, I finally wrote it. So even though that sounds heavy, it's still like my daddy was a milkman. So Big Mexican Dinner, we love Mexican food. It's about our favorite. Yeah. And when you're in the studio, up there. We go to Los Mariachis pretty much every night, for our breaks. And how much we love Mexican food. And so that's really kind of how it started, and just something silly to say. And then we write a story about it.
Fair enough. The band also covered Spirit in the Sky.
Yeah.
Considered to be the very first Christian rock song ever. Can you talk about covering that song? It's a classic song. You guys knocked it out. You made it your own. Talk a little bit more about it.
Well, that one, we were out on the road with Hank. We were doing our sound check one day, and we'd already, our rag top off of the first album is a boogie. It's kind of a boogie song, and a shuffle boogie. And Greg just started playing. He just started playing it one day in sound check, and we all just fell into it and started singing it. It literally just came out. Greg just grabbed it out of the sky and started playing it. We didn't talk about it. We did, hey, we ought to do Spirit in the Sky. Nothing like that. He just started jamming on it, and we went, oh, okay. And so we did it, and then, we looked at each other and went, well, man, that's cool. We ought to cut it. So that's how that came about. We cut it on the second album, on Electric Barnyard, and it did get significant amount of air. That wasn't officially a single, but Polygram, New York, which of course they were the purse strings. They owned Mercury, Nashville, and they ended up putting it on a compilation disc, with Bon Jovi and Kiss and whoever they had on on the labels at the time, and just a compilation of the song from each act and sent it out to radio stations. So it got a lot of airplay just kind of independently on its own. And that happened. The reason they did that happened on the first album. They ended up putting My Daddy Was a Milkman on a compilation disc with Bon Jovi and with Kiss and with Cougar and all. I mean, it was that type of company that we were with. And lo and behold, there was about 16, 18, maybe even 20 rock stations across the country that just started playing it. Nice. And all of a sudden their request lines are lighting up, and it's becoming like the top 5 requested song. And it's not a single, and Nashville didn't know anything about it. And this is when they were still trying to convince radio that, hey, no, they're a country band. They're a country band. You can play them. And so it entered, how they found out, it entered Billboard magazine at the time, had that top 20 album cuts that's getting significant amount of airplay, not singles, but still getting a lot of airplay. And it came in at 19 or something.
Oh wow!
Entered the chart, and so it was Dallas, it was Buffalo, New York, it was Chicago, Nashville, KDF right here in Nashville was playing it. In fact, we became good friends with Carl P. Mayfield, who was a rock DJ, legendary around here at the time, who ended up converting that station, ended up going country during our time when all this was going on. And so Carl P. was right in there with us. He tells us the story about once Mercury heard that this was going on, they started calling all the stations saying, "You got to stop playing that song." And Carl P. tells the story. He said, I took the phone off from my ear and I kind of hit it on the table there, and I said, "Say what? You're telling me I got to stop playing the song instead of begging me to play a song? Yes, you got to stop playing that song. Lord, we're having so much trouble convincing country radio that they're country. All this is going to do is just mess it up." What they didn't realize, which Harold Shedd admits it to this day now, because he still comes out and sees us sometimes, is they screwed that up big time. They should have. They were getting. It was becoming a hit without them even having to try.
Yeah. And
so they should have put money behind it and promoted it and let it be a crossover. But at that time, here we are talking about that era, that particular period of time in country music and in music in general, where things were opening up and expanding and they were letting other things in. It could have been the first rock crossover from country. Country music's always been cool with pop crossover. You can cross over in pop. That's okay. But rock and country was always oil and water. It never mixed. We could have proved that, hey, no, you can go from this to that. and they killed it. I mean, they just killed it. But it got enough airplay out there. That's still one we play to this day in our set. We have to.
And that's such a head scratcher to me, because when Garth Brooks covered "Hard Luck Woman" by Kiss, killer version of it, but they really put the kibosh to it as far that could have been a number one song. Do you just feel as though that with your situation and then Garth's situation that maybe country music just wasn't ready for that yet?
They weren't ready for it. They weren't ready for it at all. And also, as I mentioned earlier, they could have released every song on Pickin' as a single. They could have released every one of them. But that wasn't the norm. You got 3 singles and it's move on. Well, we talked them into a 4th, and we barely did that. We talked them into a 4th single and put them off for about half a year as far as going back in. Pickin' on Nashville stayed at number 2 for like 48 weeks in a row.
Oh, cool.
Would never go to number 1 because at the time it wasn't just sales, it was radio airplay. It had some kind of formula that made it that determined where you was at in the charts. And it was just before SoundScan, in other words. And if it had just been SoundScan, it'd probably been number 1 for that amount of time. Mm-hmm. And so we finally gave in and went in to do Electric Barnyard. Like I said, it was already written. We could have recorded it first. And so after it was released, it made it to number 3, and Pickin' was at number 2. And then, of course, it finally knocked Pickin' out. So we should have waited another 6 months. We should have just, I don't know what, just even if we didn't get another single, we should have just let Pickin' just keep going, because that's what was going on at the time. So we kind of, even though we waited and did make them wait a little bit, to record the second album, it did kind of, move Pickin' then on back down the way. So, it's just, we had no idea, that's what would happen. We kind of knew that we needed to wait, and so we did wait as long as we could. But anyway, I'm certainly not complaining. Hey, no sour grapes from us at any point in time, because we would have we would have never thought all that happened could have happened. Let's just put it that way. So we've been very, very fortunate, and we know it.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so as you can tell, Jeff and I are big music geeks, and for you as the fan, so let's put it this way: the Kentucky Headhunters put out music that it made people change the way they listen to music, right? At least that's what I feel as though the Headhunters did for country music and rock, southern rock and roll, whatever you want to call it. But you as the fan, as the fan of music. I'm going to take you back a little bit. What was the album for you as the fan that changed the way that you listen to music? And then I'm going to tell you mine, and then Jeff's going to tell you his. Fair enough?
Okay, yeah. Cool enough. Yeah. And what you mentioned, kind of changing things, what we heard was that we were a part of that. All of a sudden, there were young country stations. Young country. They started turning it into this particular type of genre that was okay to play, this kind of stuff. So that they said they kind of credit us as a part of that movement of young country. So it did. We, not by ourselves, of course, but it was us and Steve Earle and Dwight Yoakam and Katie Lang and Lyle Lovett and there was some cool stuff that was going on at the time. So anyway,
very much.
For me. For me, it was the Beatles. It was the Beatles, and not just one album. It was me sneaking. My brother's 7 years older than I am, and so I was sneaking his record. He didn't want me playing his albums. I mean, if he'd have caught me playing his albums, he'd beat my butt. but because Fred was going to scratch him or whatever. So I'm 6-7 years old, in our little record stereo with the 2 little speakers. We had hardwood floors. I'd lay down. I'd put the record player and the 2 speakers, and I'd lay down between the speakers and turn them into my ears, and I would listen to the Beatles. And it was from beginning, whatever he had, I was listening to the Beatles. And so now this is I'm 7 years old, so that changed it all for me. And from there, of course, then you start searching out other things. And Ricky had a great collection of stuff because he was obviously in the music as well. So he was his Stones. It was ZZ Top, early ZZ Top.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's late 60s, early 70s. But so I'm 8 or 9 or 10. I was born in 1960. So let's see, who else was he such a huge Steppenwolf? Oh gosh,
yes,
he was a huge Steppenwolf fan as well, big time. And my little town of Cardwell, Missouri, if you go a few miles west and a little bit south, you'll be in Black Oak, Arkansas. It's only about 35 miles from us. And so, believe me, Jim Dandy and at Black Oak was, that was big stuff for us. For somebody to be that close to us and local. So we was listening to a lot of Black Oak, Arkansas as well. And the cool thing is Fred and them were huge fans too. So, and which of course we didn't know that at the time. We had no idea about each other back then, but they were huge Black Oak fans too. So, but my dad, my 94-year-old father, who's preached, he's been a preacher and pastor since I was 2,
mm-hmm.
and still living. He's last year he ended up with a little brain bleed thing in the back of his neck there, and it got him off balance, and he's now having to be in assisted living back in Northeast Arkansas. But I said all my family play. He plays guitar and sings and writes poems, and so he loved country music. He loved Hank Sr. and he loved Ernest Tubb, and so I heard a lot of that too, growing up. And I heard a lot of Lawrence Welk on the weekends too, believe me. So we watched a lot of that too. So now you kind of you start seeing all the influences. At the time, it was just a great time to be listening to music because you had Hendrix and, all the stuff that Cream and the British invasion, which was, they were pulling from the old and from blues from America and doing their own thing with it. And man, to me, it was one of the most creative times in music for all genres. And, I think we were kind of a small part of bringing that back, that diversity, that, different genres melding together and all that kind of stuff, in those late 80s and early 90s. It was sort of the second coming of it. It wasn't maybe as big or as cool, but it was because of what they were doing is why it was what we were doing, at the time.
Yeah. Well, when I was a kid, we had a neighborhood record store. I used to ride my bike up to the record store, and I'd walk in, and they would have all different sorts of music playing. One time it would be, the Kentucky Headhunters. Another time it would be, the Colt. It would be whatever. But one day I rode my bike up, and actually I drove my car. I was 17 at the time. I walked in, and the manager of the store had The Cure's Disintegration on, and it's an orchestral album. It was the wall of sound that came out of that album. I'd never heard anything like it in my life. And once again, 1989, amongst other great albums. But that was the album that really made me change and really focus in on the music instead of because I was a Motley Crue, Def Leppard kid. All that stuff. The Police, Genesis, all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
And
all great stuff, man. All great stuff.
Exactly. And so you hear something different, and it just totally captivates you, and it just makes you listen to things differently. What about you, Jeff? What was the album that changed you?
Well, I'm a music schizophrenia. I like every kind of genre that there is, but my parents grew, the Animals, the Monkees, the Beatles, and Beach Boys and Elvis were obviously in our household, and I think that's where my love of I sing in the barbershop harmony chorus, and so I think my love of that 4-part harmony goes back to those days of listening to the Beatles and the Monkees. And but I probably could pick one for every generation of music that I've listened to along the way. But as I was getting into all the 80s hair metal and starting to really get into that, I discovered George Thorogood and the Delaware Destroyers too.
Yeah,
and I went right into down a blues path that I've crossed back and forth over the years, and I love it.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
and it just that kind of stuff broadens. It just broadens your musical, your musical horizons. It really does.
And we really need to tip our hat to you and the rest of the band for what you've done for music and how you've crossed genres and you've come back and you've gone a little bit everywhere. But I have one last question for you, and we'll leave you alone for the evening. Deal?
All right. Bring it on.
So the mystery of rock and roll, country music as well, has kind of gone by the wayside with the internet and social media. Everybody knows everything about entertainers, musicians, rock stars, whatever you want to call them. For you, the fan and the artist, what do you prefer? Do you miss the mystery and the mystique of country and rock music, or do you like this new accessibility that fans have with you? Because, hey, let's face it, if we didn't have social media and we didn't have the internet, we wouldn't be doing this with you right now. So I guess where are you in your head? What do you prefer, the mystery, or do you like the accessibility?
Well, I think it was a combination of both. I like that not knowing but wanting to know.
Yeah.
But then now we have this access, to be able to know. So maybe it's tilted that way. I know the mystery is not as probably prevalent as it once was, obviously. But you want people to want to know, and then hopefully when they find out, it's not a disappointment. you have somebody that you look up to and everything, and you go up and you try to talk to them or whatever, and they're butthole to you, and you go, oh man, I didn't want to know that. But anyway, I do like the accessibility of, we're very up until COVID, we always came back out and hung out and just visited and signed and did whatever. COVID, kind of put a kibosh on that, because we ended up, in our organization, some one here and one there and whatever time, we've lost gigs because of it. So we really kind of had to rein ourselves in and go, okay, let's be disciplined. That's, people I think will understand. We're not going to do meet and greets and whatever for a bit. So, but now we've started coming back out again, and it kind of loosely. We're not doing anything officially organized, and we don't do the. If the promoter wants it and we can work it out, we don't do the, pay extra money. We don't do it. So I know sometimes promoters will do it without our knowledge, but we don't go that route. But I know a lot do. But we do like meeting the folks, and just being friendly, and I think that I think they appreciate it. Let's put it that way. So. And then they'll want to come back and see you again,
It speaks volumes about the quality of the people of the band. Before we let you go for the evening, is there anything that we left off tonight that you would like to plug or promote?
Well, just our new merch, it's not new. He's been with us this past year and still with us. Our merch guy, Boone, who is an incredible guitar player and singer himself, and had a band called Otis that Greg produced and got him a deal, and they toured the world, and he ended up with a little throat issue cancer thing, which is cool now, but it kind of closed the band down, and so he's out with us right now and putting his band back together. He is our social media guy, so we are getting a lot more exposure, every show, upcoming stuff. He's really good at posting everything, so our visibility is way up. Go check out our site, Facebook, and I think we're on all of it now. I don't know, us old farts. We let the younger guys handle it, but check out our dates. That's the thing, man. Come see us live, because live is really, live is where it's at. And first two shows, any indication, we're going to have a great time this year.
Oh, nice. It's exciting. So, well, this is how things are going to work out. Jeff and I and our wives are heading down to Mexico for a while and vacationing, and we're going to have lots of big Mexican dinners down there. So,
right on.
So, when we get back, this episode we think about first part of April, Jeff.
Yeah.
I think that's fair enough. It'll be available, and if you could share it wherever you can, and let your social media people.
Yeah, we'll let Boone. Yeah, we'll make sure Boone gets hold of it as well.
Fantastic. So it was an honor to have you on.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate you. Appreciate the invite, and I enjoyed the chat.
Hey, and anytime you want to come back on to promote anything, let us know. We'll have you on immediately.
Okay, sounds great, guys.
All right, man.
I appreciate it.
You take care.
Take care of yourself.
Y'all too. Thank you. Hey, be safe down there.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Everybody hides at home inside their nest of snakes. Everybody grinds the stone and makes their own mistakes. Hide in the headlights, fight the grip of fear. You can make your dreams come true, but you just can't do it